And we are back. This is Radio Free Warsaw. I am your host, Nick Shakirski, and we are coming to you from the center of Poland's lovely capital, a city of about 2 million people. And it's a foggy day. I can see out my window that it is not the best weather. It's close to freezing. It's about 34, 35 degrees, so it's been colder recently, but it's still not too pleasant. Your face tends to freeze if you're outside for too long in this weather. We had a little bit of snow the last week or two, but it tends to melt within a couple of days because then it warms up. But you can definitely feel winter in the air. You can feel that Christmas is coming soon. You have Christmas music playing. You have Santa Clauses walking around downtown selling things and wrapping presents and dancing and whatnot. So actually DJing. I saw a couple of Santa Claus DJs recently on Marszałkowska Street, which is the central street in downtown Warsaw. Of course, here they don't call it downtown. They call it Centrum or Śródmieście, which basically means the inner city or the center of the city, which is where I live, and it's also where my studio is. Two separate locations, though. This is in a highly secret, secure location that you will probably never find out about. Or maybe you will, I don't know. I'll decide later if I'm going to tell you. In any case, Radio Free Warsaw, where does this name come from? Who came up with this thing? What is this crazy idea? Radio Free Warsaw was inspired by Radio Free Europe. Radio Free Europe was funded and is still funded by the U.S. government. It was founded in the early years of the Cold War. It was based in Munich, Germany, and it broadcast into the Soviet Union, into the Iron Curtain states, so the different countries that were under the yoke of the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union. And they played music, they played jazz music, they had talk show type programming, and this would be jammed by the Russians to varying degrees of success, but most people in Europe under Soviet control who had access to a radio got some degree of this programming. Some element of this programming made it to them over the years that it was active. So that's my inspiration. I had the chance to meet people who were involved with Radio Free Europe, or RFE as it's known. People who worked there like Ross Johnson, the late Ross Johnson. He passed away a few years ago. He was one of the directors there, and a nice guy. I met him through the Hoover Institution, where I worked in the library and archives. A huge portion of the RFE archives are at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. And a lot of interesting things in that collection. A lot of not so interesting things as well. It's a very large collection and kind of an albatross because there's value there, but it's also a huge amount of stuff to store. In any case, that's not my problem anymore. And but the inspiration is that I'm here in Warsaw, Poland. I think it is one of the, if not the capital of the free world these days. It's a place where you can speak relatively freely. Of course, the government, which has been accused of being, various things, nationalistic, fascistic, all these ad hominem attacks, which are not true at all. It is certainly a pro-Polish government. Some would say that it's a cynical thing. I think it's generally positive. I'm not a huge fan of the government, but I prefer them to the opposition, which reminds me of the let's say politicians in the U.S. who are not super pro-American, and they have very subversive and not so attractive ideas as far as maintaining your societal cohesion, maintaining good relations between neighbors. I think there are a lot of things that certainly we can talk about in the show. I'm not gonna dive into everything today, and I do want the focus to be more so on history, which is my forte. I spent 15 years working at the Hoover Institution Library and Archives at Stanford. My father, Dr. Maciej Siekierski, is the curator emeritus of the European collections at Hoover. He was there for 37 years, so a very long time, close to 40 years of a career, great career, doing a lot to preserve the history of Europe and especially Poland, but that's also a story for another day. In any case, I certainly feel very privileged and grateful for having had the opportunity to learn so much from my dad, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning from him, even though he's retired, and to have learned so much through that experience working at the Hoover Institution. However, California, Stanford University being the chief culprit among institutions in that state, is not friendly towards people who have viewpoints that are against the prevailing orthodoxy. I think that freedom of speech is probably at its lowest as far as your ability to just, share your opinion, discuss different topics. It's probably one of the worst places in the United States and perhaps in the world. And I'm talking about the Bay Area, California, a place where for wearing a red hat, not even a Make America Great Again hat, and I've got mine here from 2016. I don't know if I'll vote for Trump. We'll see how far he gets, but I certainly am not going to vote for Joe Biden or anyone else put out by the Democrats. I'm very skeptical towards the Republican Party itself, but Trump was something different. That's another topic for another day. In any case, whether you support Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or whoever it is, you shouldn't have to worry that if you're wearing their paraphernalia or just a red hat, forget about the Make America Great Again. If you're wearing a red hat in California, you could get attacked. You could get your head, bashed in. Definitely if you have a bumper sticker on your car that says Make America Great Again or refers in some way to Trump or conservative politics, that type of thing, you'll be likely to suffer some very negative consequences. Of course, in San Francisco, you can suffer negative consequences without any bumper stickers just by parking your car on the street. There, apparently, 100 or more times a day, people have their windows bashed in order for people who are addicted to drugs, homeless, and other hard cases to take things. Sometimes they use cars as a toilet, and it's not an interesting place. So if that can happen to you by just going about your daily business, forget about advertising politics that are at odds with the prevailing orthodoxy in places like San Francisco. Radio Free Warsaw, on the other hand, is my contribution to the discussion specifically about Poland. Of course, we can talk about U.S. politics and whatnot, although that's probably not a great idea these days. But I've followed it closely for 20 years, and I know a thing or two, and I can understand when people get older. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I'm not an old timer yet. I can understand how people get very cynical towards politics. But like I said, my focus is going to be history. I think with history, I know with history, you have the perspective of time, which is so important, as opposed to the ongoing discussions and sound bites and propaganda that is thrown at you all day long when we're talking about current political affairs, which are very easy to manipulate because we don't have all the information. It doesn't mean that in 5, 10, 20 years we're going to have all the information about events that have happened in our time, but you certainly have a much clearer perspective. Information tends to come out when people write their memoirs. Information is released through the Freedom of Information Act if it wasn't destroyed or taken or something like that. But you tend to learn a lot more about what really happened, whether we're talking about the Vietnam War or World War II or other events, with the passage of time. So that's why I'm interested in my doctorate was on American relief to Poland after World War I, led by Herbert Hoover, the great Herbert Hoover, one of the greatest Americans of all time, unfairly criticized for his presidential administration, and but someone who was a Renaissance man who helped to save millions of people from starvation, malnutrition, and helped to rebuild Europe after World War I. That'll be the subject of another show too. But if you're interested in any of the topics that I've raised, I'd love to hear from you. So if you could submit a comment below, I'll try to reply to all of them if I can. And if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to hear from me, then I welcome you to comment. Zapraszam, żeby po polsku też pisać, ale oczywiście to jest szansa, żeby po angielsku trochę też poćwiczyć. I just said that I invite you can write in Polish if you want. I assume there'll be some Polish people interested in this content, but it's also a chance to practice English. That's one of my big things, is that there's so many interesting stories about Poland and its history and current events, and how history affects current events, and especially World War II history, which I have a family connection to through my grandfathers and through my mom's side of the family, and all kinds of things, and personal interest that need to be told. These stories need to be told, and I think Poland has a lot to say that it hasn't said, because many Polish people, even though their English is quite good, and I know this as a teacher of English in Poland, as a translator from Polish into English, I translate professionally. I know that Poles are just not very confident about speaking and sharing their opinions and their stories in English because they lack confidence. And the lack of confidence, it's my theory here, and we can go into this in depth in another show, but it's that in the Polish education system, there just isn't a lot of focus on conversation, which is understandable because you can't have native speakers available to practice conversation with. Most of the English teachers in Poland are ethnic Poles, so English is their second or maybe even third language, and I'm sure most of them do the best they can, but there's just no way to practice that speaking. And of course, kids or teenagers, when they're in class, it's strange, and to converse with one another, practice with one another in English when you're still learning it and you may not be confident about it and whatnot. So, as someone who was born in California, raised there, went to high school and college there, and spent most of my life there, English is basically my first language. Even though I learned Polish as I was growing up and I speak Polish quite well, English is definitely where it's at for me. So I think I can communicate a lot about Poland, about its history, that otherwise people won't learn about. There's a lot of great history being written in Poland, in Polish, that never makes it out into the world. And even if it does make it out, even if it's translated, people don't read as much as they used to. So we're in a very much a visual video society. Maybe it's going too far in that direction with things like TikTok and this very, very short attention span content. But there are a lot of people out there who still want to watch some medium and long form content. I'm one of them, so I watch a lot of YouTube, and usually it's stuff that's a little more in depth. So I'd like to use the channel and use the show, Radio Free Warsaw, to share some of those things. So thank you so much for joining me, and if you have any questions, please leave them below. Suggestions, I'd also love to hear them. And also hit subscribe, and you'll see much more from me coming soon. Let me just add a few words here before I close out, that Poland has been a very interesting place to be in. I was gone for several years from Poland. I returned in February. I defended my doctorate February 22nd, and then February 24th is when Russia invaded Ukraine. So it was a very stressful but also interesting time to be in. Poland has been fortunate to have not had direct impact from the war, besides what appears to have been a Ukrainian anti-missile defense missile that hit Poland a few weeks ago and ended up killing two innocent men. So God rest their souls. But besides that, Poland has been mainly free from the direct warfare aspect, although they've taken in a huge amount of refugees. I just learned today, and I couldn't believe it. I thought the number was 4 million, but Poland has actually taken in over 8 million Ukrainian refugees since February. Most of them have returned to Ukraine or gone on to other countries, but there still is at least 1 million Ukrainian refugees on top of probably 1 million or more Ukrainians that were already here in Poland. And there has been a lot of back and forth, so the numbers aren't totally clear, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are around 2 million Ukrainians in Poland today, and certainly 100,000 or 200,000 at least have come into Warsaw. So that's been a part of the dynamic at play here in Poland, and especially in Warsaw. Poland has been doing huge amounts to help the Ukrainian people, namely through providing benefits to Ukrainians, which mostly consist of Ukrainian women and children. Ukrainian children are attending Polish public schools, and they're also receiving a monthly stipend, as Polish women do who have children. Everyone who has a child or more, they get 500 Polish zlotys, which is about $110 a month for each child as a supplementary benefit to families with children. Who knows where things are going to go, but the show is going to be a place where I'm going to share some thoughts and more information about that situation in Poland today. So Poland is definitely at the forefront of a lot. If you see on my channel, you can see a video, maybe I'll try to put it up here, of when President Joe Biden came to visit Warsaw back in March, or maybe another video I'll show either here or here or here about Vice President Kamala Harris when she was here in Warsaw, and I shared some of my initial impressions at the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine there. So there is some interest in this. As I said, Poland doesn't have nearly enough people talking about what's going on here in English, people that are Polish and that are based in Poland and have an investment in the country and aren't, mass media places like the New York Times or CNN or other places I won't name that have a questionable and, if not skewed, view of Poland and are presenting a very distorted picture of what's going on here. Poland is one of the best places, if not the best country in the world, as far as personal freedom, as far as traditional values. It's a very interesting mix here, and you could say that some of the more open and tolerant stuff could lead Poland in the direction of the United States, places like California, but that's another topic for another show. In the meantime, I'm very happy to be here. This is my ancestral homeland. I haven't gone into my family history, but even though I was born and raised in California, all my family, all my ancestors are from Poland. My mom's side is here from Warsaw. My dad's side is from Poznań, and I have lots of family here. So it's really home base for me. I live a few blocks from where my great-grandfather came with his family from Vilnius following the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. He opened a tailor's shop just a block away from where I live. My mom lived 2 blocks away. So there's a lot of family history tied to Warsaw, and so it's a great place to be, and I look forward to sharing more with you as time goes on. Hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Radio Free Warsaw, this is Nick Shakierski signing off. Talk to you later.